You know what's stressful?
Being alive. Especially as a teenager.
Enter Lynne, a short free visual novel developed by ebi-hime. For anyone who may not know, visual novels are like anime, the book, but with more artwork, voice acting, and music. Many visual novels will have you, the player, make choices throughout the game that change the course of the story, but there are some with no choices that follow a linear story known as kinetic novels. That is what Lynne is, a psychological horror kinetic visual novel that ended up taking 76 minutes of my time to read. ebi-hime, the developer of the game, has a fair amount of visual novels on Steam, and her two main genres are horror and romance, or a combination of the two. I've only read one of her other visual novels a long time ago, The Way We All Go, which gave me some very Higurashi When They Cry vibes in the best possible ways, but she has really outdone herself with that visual novel and this one, and is quickly shaping up to be one of my favorite visual novel writers. That's enough intro though. Hello to everyone who's watching, it is hopefully an okay editor, 357 here, and here's a quick review on the free visual novel, Lynne. Let's start with the plot summary. Being such a short read, there's not much I can say about the happenings of Lynne that I wouldn't consider spoiler territory. Lynne is an experience, and I know that's a vague thing to say, but what I mean is, a lot of the moments that really get to you won't have that same punch if you know what it is or that it's coming. So let me describe the setting. You are Lynne, a high school girl with no self-confidence in London who is stressing out over her exams which are quickly approaching. How do you know she's stressed? Well, aside from her internal monologuing and dialogue with other characters, you have a stress meter in the top right corner that increases every time something stressful happens and, well, Lynne gets stressed out. Your father has high expectations of you, adding to your levels of stress because he considers your big sister, 19-year-old Jazz who is currently pregnant, a screw-up. He says he doesn't want to make the same mistakes he and his wife did raising Jazz, so as the smart one of the family, as both he and Jazz do declare often, you really don't want to disappoint them. In your class, there's also a girl who looks identical to you, with even almost the same exact name as you, Lynne, but with an extra E at the end. Although she may look the same, according to Lynne, even one glance at just the clothes she's wearing makes it clear that she's better than you. At seemingly everything, she's just better at life. That's what Lynne thinks anyways, never having actually talked to the identical girl, but she resents her for it. And yeah, there's the setting or spoiler-free plot summary of Lynne. You go through your daily high school life, talk to your friends who seem to have their lives more together than you get scary nightmares every now and then, and throughout everything else that happens in this quick story, your stress meter goes up as Lynne gets more and more stressed. The stress meter is such a simple yet engaging element to the story. As you watch Lynne struggle throughout the story, seeing what gets to her not only through her inner dialogue and reactions, but in a numerical value adds this ever-present intrigue to the story. Trying to figure out what maybe seemingly small things will add to Lynne's ever-increasing and piling stress really kept me interested, and the amount of stress points, as I call them, will differ depending on the things happening to her. It's fun to be like,
Oh boy, I wonder what's gonna psychologically or emotionally scar her today.
ebi-hime did a wonderful job keeping me invested in the story and the characters. Her writing is just so real. All the characters, even the ones without their own character sprites, felt almost like people I know, minus the fact that the people I know don't look like anime characters. ebi-hime gives just enough background information, characterization, and dialogue with each of the characters that they don't take away from the main character of this short story, Lynne, but still feel like really well written and developed characters. I think a sign of amazing character writing is when certain characters will stick with you long after reading a story. And I only just finished this visual novel, but I already feel like I know some of these characters in my real life. And all this being said, I haven't started talking about the main character specifically, Lynne. My heart goes out to Lynne. It didn't take me long for me to get really attached to her character. She doesn't have self-confidence, and it shows in the things she thinks or says to herself. Not only that, but the way she acts around people or carries herself as a person. I was surprised when I found that so many of the things Lynne says or thinks about herself I've thought or said to myself. The tragic thing is, along with this lack of self-confidence, she has expectations placed upon her by her family that make her feel like even more of a screw-up when things don't go the way she wants. That and seeing the person she considers a better version of herself, Lynne, in her class every day, all comes together to make her daily life a struggle. Given she's not a perfect angel or anything like that, like I said before, she heavily dislikes or rather hates Lynne, despite never talking to her or knowing much about her as a person. Despite this, I still sympathize for her and want the best to happen for her because her emotional insecurities along with her situation is what's making her this way. A bitter, twisted, and miserable person. When a story can make me feel so badly for someone and want nothing more in the story than their happiness or satisfaction, the story is definitely doing its job. And now for the writing itself. It's seriously amazing. Such detail is put into describing even the most mundane of rooms that you feel like every location you're in has a history, and you can imagine scenarios in your head of what the characters do aside from what we see in the story with ease. The story is from Lynne's point of view, and ebi-hime has a wonderful way of making the player feel uncomfortable as you read the story. If you're not already relating to the everyday struggles of Lynne, maybe the somehow grotesque description of something as simple as a roll of toilet paper will cause you to physically cringe. I definitely did a decent amount of times throughout the story. ebi-hime has this way of describing both mundane things in uncomfortable ways to to instill this sense of anxiety in the readers, and also more intense and scary things to freak you out even more. Some of the happenings in the story made me really uncomfortable and paranoid at even the slightest thing. Take this physical uncomfortableness, added with the sense of dread and anxiety that the descriptions of the story, settings, and mindset of Lynne can instill, and then add the ever-rising stress meter, and you have a story rife with tension that will keep you on edge for a decent amount of it. There are a good amount of casual scenes as well, solely for furthering the story and characters, but even during those scenes, you know that something terrible or emotionally scarring can be waiting just around the corner. And if you're invested in the characters, those scenes will have just as much of an impact as the tense ones, just in different ways. My one complaint with the story is the ending, which I find to be a little abrupt, but only the very last moment. The whole last 15 minutes of the game leading up to the ending is amazingly well written, filled with palpable tension and emotional payoff for the story. One moment in particular is the most spooked a visual novel has had me in a while. It got to the point where I actually had to get out of my seat and walk away for a second. It's just the very last thing that happens. I understand why it happens and think it's a natural progression of the story of Lynne, but the credits start rolling at a certain point and it feels like there was more to see. It felt a little incomplete. I feel like the scene could have dragged on for at least another minute, or we could have jumped ahead in time a bit and seen the aftermath. However, ebi-hime has made it a point even in the description of the game on Steam that if you enjoyed this visual novel, you should check out another one of hers on Steam called Nothing and Nowhere, which she says is related to Lynne. Having just finished Lynne, I haven't played Nothing and Nowhere yet, though I intend to in the future, but I have a couple guesses as to how they are related, aside from thematically speaking. So maybe playing that game will fix my problem with Lynne's ending, and this visual novel serves the purpose as more of a free prequel or related story to Nothing and Nowhere. Almost like a demo of sorts. If that's the case though, I think it's really impressive that Lynne manages to stand out on its own minus what is in my opinion a lackluster ending. Real quickly, let's talk about the art and soundtrack. The background art are real stock photos with a blurry effect to it, which I don't mind. I've played other visual novels with that same sort of thing, and while I can see why some people would dislike not having drawn backgrounds, I think it makes the visuals, especially when clashing against the character sprites, very surreal, and I think it fits the tone of the story very well. The character sprites themselves are well drawn and enjoyable to look at. The bright nature of them creates an interesting clash with the subject of Lynne's story. The music for more intense scenes becomes slow and distorted, adding even more of a sense of panic to those scenes already filled with tension. It's especially freaky with headphones on. If I'm being honest, those are the moments the music stood out to me most, as I can't really recall much about the background music to any other scenes. If nothing else, there was no track that I found annoying or too repetitive, which is nice. So is Lynne worth your time? Absolutely. It shows the strain that daily life, expectations, and other things can put on you, and aside from an awkward ending that may get resolved by Nothing and Nowhere, it's masterfully executed in a short amount of time. And it's free, which my wallet definitely appreciates, so there's no good reason not to give the story a try unless it just doesn't sound like your type of thing. I rate Lynne an 8.5 out of 10. Thank you to everyone who's watching. This has been hopefully an okay editor 357 here, and I hope you enjoyed my review of Lynne.